Drought is a disaster, but it is also revealing our past. As things heat up and dry out across the globe, water levels are getting lower and revealing all kinds of secrets. From a 7,000-year-old Stonehenge in Spain to a sunken village in Greece and even mysterious tombs in Mesopotamia, some things were never meant to be seen again.
Spanish Stonehenge.
Spain has its own Stonehenge. Some might even say it's as impressive as England's Stonehenge, the crowned king of all rock henges. The problem with Spain's stone megalith is that it only makes an appearance once in a blue moon.
Spain's Stonehenge is a 7,000-year-old monument living in a reservoir, and it only surfaces when the waterline sinks low enough. It's almost like archaeology's version of a pop-up shop, except instead of candles and tote bags, you get sun temples and burial grounds. While most people casually call it the Spanish Stonehenge, its real name is the Dolmen of Guadalperal. Now, let me tell you the story of how such a phenomenal piece of prehistoric engineering ended up in a reservoir. From Franco to floodwater.
In 1963, Francisco Franco's push for modernization in Spain resulted in a dam being built that swallowed the dolmen whole. The civil engineering project brought electricity and irrigation to the region, but it also turned one of Europe's rarest megalithic monuments into an accidental scuba attraction.
Hugo Obermeier, a German researcher, had excavated it decades earlier, leaving the boulders in place after hauling smaller artifacts to Germany. He even found a Roman coin, suggesting the site had been plundered long before Franco's bulldozers arrived. That's pretty cool. Imagine 2,000 years ago some random Roman wandered off into the wilderness and stumbled upon this ancient, towering rock structure. They were probably just as awed by it as we are today. Perhaps the Roman leaned down to touch the stone and a coin fell from their pocket. I wonder what the Romans thought they were looking at.
Then Hugo picked it up 2,000 years later. That's a coin I would pass down as an heirloom.
The monument itself once boasted around 140 boulders set in a concentric ring. Originally capped with horizontal slabs, it formed an enclosed chamber for burials, while also serving as a ritual space. At its entrance stood a carved menhir, possibly depicting the snaking path of the Tagus River, or maybe just a very self-confident snake.
If the former, it might be one of the world's oldest maps. If the latter, congratulations! Scientists have been obsessing over a snake doodle.
Scholars believe the dolmen doubled as a sacred center and a commercial stopover, since it overlooked one of the few easy crossing points on the river. Call it part temple, part trading post. The perils of resurrection.
For locals like Angel Castaño, seeing the dolmen fully exposed for the first time in decades due to the drought is both breathtaking and terrifying.
Granite is porous, and centuries underwater haven't exactly made these stones spa day fresh. Some are cracked, some toppled, and all are vulnerable to the curious visitors clambering over them like they're at McDonald's play zone. Right now, there's no surveillance or rules, and you know what that means. Tourists can stroll up, touch, and even climb on the megaliths and have lunch. Preservationists are begging for relocation to dry land, while the Ministry of Culture dithers over whether to save the dolmen or let the waters reclaim it. In other words, the Spanish Stonehenge is stuck in limbo. It's part national treasure, part accidental water feature, and the Spanish government can't decide whether it gets a second life or another drowning.
What do you think? Is it worth a little bit of the budget to preserve a potentially 7,000-year-old structure? Or is it too much to ask the politicians? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
The stones that cry hunger.
Europe's rivers are running dry and the rocks are talking. Throughout history, drought has been the biggest curse a civilization could inherit. Drought has toppled civilizations with more efficiency and speed than the largest human armies. And in Europe, the rocks remember, and they're still crying about it.
Centuries before hashtags or hydrographs, Europeans used river rocks as a way to mark how deadly a particular drought got. When a drought ravaged the countryside and the rivers ran dry, people got down into the riverbeds and started writing messages. Those messages are now preserved as hunger stones, grim time capsules carved into the beds of major rivers like the Elbe and the Rhine. When the water dips low enough to reveal them, the message is clear: prepare for famine.
In the old times, before oranges in January thanks to globalization, the appearance of the hunger stones meant the crops would fail, ships would stall, and beer would get more expensive. But really, it meant death. When drought got hunger stones bad, it meant suffering was on its way.
But how did some damp slabs of sandstone become the doomsday billboards of Central Europe? To understand, we need to dive straight into this centuries-old graffiti that foretells famine with all the cheer of a tax audit. The river's ghost story.
Before they were tourist attractions, the hunger stones were legitimate warning systems for people whose lives depended on the river.
Shipbuilders, merchants, and farmers left their initials and waterline marks carved into the stone, turning river rocks into a community bulletin board. Except every post was a disaster announcement. Kind of depressing, actually. The oldest legible hunger stone inscription in Deccan dates back to 1616, but records suggest they may go as far back as the 1400s. At the time, river workers lived or died by the Elba's flow. If the river dried up, so did trade, wages, and food. Hungerstone wasn't some poetic title given to these rocks. They really did announce the coming of hunger. When the stones appeared, things were about to take a very sharp turn toward Hungry Land. Though to be fair, people have called them by other names in the past, including frog stones, monk stones, and strange stones. Not sure what the references are for these names, but hunger stones probably makes the most sense. From the 11th century onward, the Elbe River was an economic artery. It flowed from the Czech mountains to the North Sea, carrying grain, wine, timber, and bad decisions across Europe. And when the flow stopped, civilization paused. In 1666, a drought so severe hit Central Europe that fields cracked dry. Forests burned, and villagers walked 6 to 7 miles for water. This is recorded in both hunger stones and historical records.
In 1503, Prague citizens were ordered to fast and pray for rain because they were dying in a brutal drought. And in 1842, the drought was so bad that Austria, Prussia, and Denmark joined forces to form the Elbe Commission to somehow get the river wet again. Turns out even imperial rivals will cooperate when the beer barges stop arriving.
The innkeeper, the river, and the beer tap of doom. But not every hunger stone was treated with such solemnity. In 1904, a Czech innkeeper named Franz Meyer decided to turn ecological disaster into a business model. His hometown along the Elbe River was experiencing a brutal summer drought. The river had shrunk to a sulking puddle, which exposed a large sandstone slab near the town's suspension bridge. It was a hunger stone etched with old drought records.
Franz, being the innovator that he was, chiseled a fresh inscription reading, "If you see me, weep," which is probably one of the creepiest things someone from the past can write to you in the future.
He then installed a beer tap and charged people to come drink beer while staring into the abyss. Nothing says summer fun like sipping Pilsner next to a rock that forecasts starvation. What's crazy is that Franz's macabre business plan caught on. Another innkeeper upstream copied him. A few decades later, one hunger stone was even used to advertise irrigation pumps. Someone carved into it, "Don't cry, girl, don't whine, spray when the field is dry." Crazy, right? Even doomsday rocks weren't safe from 1930s marketing departments.
The hunger stones have been appearing a lot lately, probably because it keeps getting hotter, and it's starting to feel like we're overheating.
During Europe's scorching 2022 drought, dozens of hunger stones resurfaced along rivers like the Elbe, Rhine, and Mosel, halting ships and spooking modern onlookers. In towns like Leverkusen, Worms, and Pirna, the stones reappeared with dates ranging from the 1800s to as recently as 2009, just in case anyone forgot that climate change is now on its third sequel.
But not all of them have survived. In the rush to modernize river traffic, many hunger stones were blown up to clear the way for boats.
Others were permanently submerged by dams, though ironically, the dam at Deccan is so effective at regulating water flow that its hunger stone now spends a third of the year visibly yelling at tourists. It's not really a hunger stone anymore, it's more of an always-around stone. In fact, the hunger stones in the Elbe River doubled as recording instruments. In 2020, Czech hydrologists ran the numbers. They discovered that the markings on the Elbe hunger stones didn't just commemorate droughts, they accurately recorded water levels down to minimum depths, which means the Elbe stones were precision tools used by our medieval friends. Long before Europe installed hydrological stations in Paris or Magdeburg, communities were using river rocks as analog gauges.
Today, climate change is giving the hunger stones new relevance. As Europe faces hotter, drier summers, these ancient drought logs are doing what they were always meant to do. They are reappearing when things get bad and whispering reminders of past horrors to us through their carved messages. But will we listen? And now for mysterious circles in a field, but really quick, I want to say a big thank you to Jeff Widener and May Fizzy for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe or check out our memberships to join the family.
Circles in the fields.
A dry Polish field just coughed up a secret so juicy, it might get its own Netflix documentary. Two Neolithic ritual sites known as roundels, hidden for 6 millennia beneath crops and soil, were found by drone surveys.
The drone spotted the telltale crop marks, parched rings in the earth that looked less like bad farming and more like cosmic doodles left by the ancestors. These marks were only visible because the field was suffering from a drought. They would have been invisible during a normal wet season. Near the village of Kachkov, archaeologists traced the outlines of these concentric circles and realized they had stumbled onto something rare. They appeared to be the first roundels ever recorded in this region. For comparison, most of their cousins live farther south and west, in Hungary, Austria, Czechia, Slovakia, and Germany. Finding ritual roundels this far north, in Poland, is remarkable.
The builders of these 6,000-year-old structures probably belong to a little-known culture that I don't even know how to pronounce, so I will put it on the screen, so take a look. They were famous for their trapezoidal longhouses. This ancient society built Neolithic ranch-style homes.
Since 2021, archaeologist Jerzy Chernik and his team have cataloged roughly 160 of the Legiel culture's trapezoidal longhouses in the area. They all orbit the roundels like wagons around a campfire, and scientists say this placement was no accident. The roundels acted as the gravitational center of their settlements, which is particularly notable since this was long before even Stonehenge was built. It's not like humans were living in massive cities.
Most people lived in small bands, and even villages weren't particularly populated. So a farming community of 20 or 30 people could have easily had all of their homes surrounding a central roundel, which acted as a community hall, church, dance floor, whatever.
Ceremony, calendar, or cosmic clock. Roundels were the heart of the community, but what actually happened there? Sadly, no one knows for certain. Some scholars picture them as ceremonial hubs for ritual and social life, places where early farming communities danced, feasted, or solemnly marked their dead.
So maybe one day there was a big dance party following a wedding or a birth, and then on the weekend there was a funeral held at the same roundel and everyone brought their darkest wool trousers and fur hats.
Other scholars argue the roundels doubled as astronomical observatories, neatly aligned with the summer solstice sunrise. Cherniak leans towards this view, suggesting the roundels were tools to sync human lives with the agricultural calendar.
Nobody knows which theory is correct. Were these weird stone circles for celebrations, dark rituals, squinting at the sun? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
How many more do you think are hiding under Polish fields? These two were found thanks to 21st century eyes in the sky and a lack of rain. Drought thinned the crops, drones traced the ghostly rings, and archaeologists confirmed the finds through soil tests and remote sensing. In a sense, climate change handed science a magnifying glass. Maybe we'll see more next summer. Reservoir of the Dead. When the water in Iraq runs dry, history bubbles to the surface. Recently, as the Mosul Dam reservoir shrank to a hushed puddle, archaeologists grabbed their picks and brushes to see what was buried underneath. And what they found was incredible. They discovered 40 tombs, all from over 2,300 years ago. These ancient grave sites, dating back to the Hellenistic period, surface like ghost ships in the mud. It's a powerful reminder that Iraq's past is deep, and its droughts are even deeper. For 5 straight years, climate change has hit Iraq hard with scorching temperatures and relentless drought. Crops have withered, power has faltered, and the historic rivers that once carried empires have slowed to a politically charged trickle. But for archaeologists like Bekas Brivkani, the receding waterline at Mosul Dam was an unexpected invitation. The newly exposed tombs, found in the Kanke region of northern Iraq, likely date to the chaotic centuries after Alexander the Great's death, when Greek rulers controlled Mesopotamia. Brifkani and his team had surveyed the area in 2023 and spotted hints of ancient structures, but the water was still too high to access them. That all changed in 2024 when the water dropped to its lowest level in living memory. The dead, it seemed, rose to meet the living. The tombs emerged with their stonework still intact, having waited patiently under layers of silt for modern Iraq to get thirsty enough to find them. Some will be excavated and moved to the Duhok Museum for study and preservation, and others will be left behind, hopefully to be resubmerged when the rains eventually return. From hydropower house to time machine, the Mosul Dam, Iraq's largest reservoir, was never meant to be a tool for archaeologists. It was built to control floods, generate power, and store water for a growing nation.
Now, in a cruel twist, it's not doing any of those things, but historians are crawling around its dry bottom like Velma after she lost her glasses.
The drought has turned the dam's receding shoreline into a sprawling dig site. In previous years, researchers have found ruins spanning millennia, including settlements and burial grounds that predate modern borders. We are talking thousands of years of history, all buried under one reservoir. It's like if Egypt flooded the Valley of the Kings. It's terrible for agriculture, Brifkani said, but for us archaeologists, it's excavation season. So far, no big discoveries like marble sarcophagi or buried treasures have come from these tombs. But with 40 sites to explore and archaeologists spread thin, the team is working hard to bring us some cool finds. We'll have to keep an eye on the Mosul Dam. And by the way, the dam isn't the only place in Iraq where drought is revealing ancient history. Iraq has been the cradle of civilization for thousands of years, but right now, the cradle is cracked. Water reserves are down to just 8% of their capacity, and 2025 is on track to be one of the driest years since 1933. The drying rivers aren't just a result of climate change. Sure, climate change doesn't help, but the climate isn't solely to blame. People are. Turkey and Iran have built dams upstream that throttle the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, cutting off the water supply to regions in Iraq that depend on it. What used to be a shared lifeline has become a geopolitical bottleneck. Iraq is dry as a bone, and the only people benefiting are history enthusiasts, really. It's a weird situation, since archaeologists are usually the ones complaining about their sites being bulldozed by farmers or new highways. So, while farmers pray for rain, Brifkani and his team hope for more exposed cities, temples, and ancient infrastructure. They aren't praying for drought, of course, but they're making the best of a bad situation. Every dry month is another spin of the historical roulette wheel, and somewhere beneath the cracked surface of a reservoir, more of the dead are waiting their turn. The village that wouldn't stay drowned. A ghost village has risen from its watery grave. Once upon a time, in the 1970s, the Greek village of Kallio was sacrificed to satisfy Athens' thirst. A dam was built, the valley was flooded, and Kallio slipped beneath the newly formed Mornos Reservoir like a myth drowned in real estate paperwork. The village's 80 buildings, its orchards, even its schoolhouse were all swallowed for the greater good. Athens needed water, and they needed a reservoir. Kallio, as ancient as it may be, was in the way.
So the town was submerged, and almost 50 years later, it's a heat problem, one of many happening across the globe that is bringing Kallio back to the surface.
This last July was one of its hottest, which followed one of its hottest winters. This is a story that's being reported all over the globe as humanity slowly starts to roast. In Greece, as the reservoir shriveled under the sun's death glare, the drowned village rose from the deep like a soggy Atlantis. Nobody had seen it in years, and some half expected it to be occupied by sea monsters or something. Today, former residents like Yorgos Yosifidis can once again walk past what's left of their childhood homes. The village of Kallio is now a strange open-air museum of stone remains re-emerging from the reservoir mud. People can visit the houses they grew up in during the 70s. That's the first floor of my father-in-law's house, Yorgos said, and next to it, what's left of my cousin's place. It's one thing to visit your childhood neighborhood after moving away for 20 years, but to return to your childhood neighborhood that was submerged for the last almost 50 years is a different experience. The houses had all lost their second floors. Though there was one other time that Kallio was exposed. In the 1990s, a drought revealed her stone structures, but not to this extent. People couldn't move back into their old homes like they could during the most recent drought. The Mornos Reservoir, once a symbol of modern progress, now looks more like a bathtub someone forgot to refill. According to Kostas Koutsumbas, vice mayor of the relocated community, the lake dropped by 131 feet in a single year. That is not a water shortage, it's a slow-motion vanishing act. The mayor told reporters he hasn't seen anything like this in 30 years, which is saying something because in Greece, 30 years covers at least 5 political parties, 3 economic crises, and 1 actual Olympics. Now the landscape is marked with bathtub rings, water lines etched into the hillsides like a slow-draining clock. The schoolhouse is back, and residents are nervously watching the mud, wondering if the church will show up next. It's cool at first to see all these old buildings emerging from the muck, but then you realize it's a warning bell, and what comes next is not great. Usually when all the water dries up, people start to run out of food and water is a pretty critical commodity. Some local residents, like 90-year-old Konstantinos Gerodimos, still remember the Kallio that once thrived. They remember the village's fruit trees, its plentiful water, and its tight-knit community. Everyone felt like they belonged. And now Konstantinos stands on the shore looking down at childhood memories literally re-exposed by climate disaster. Meanwhile, Efthimis Lekas, a disaster management expert, would like to remind everyone in the region that this is very bad. It's an alarm bell. If the winter is dry again, things will get difficult. The Greek Environment and Energy Ministry has already issued statements promising action. Water will be drawn from backup reservoirs, leakage will be reduced, and wastewater will be recycled. Nothing says we've learned our lesson like filtering sewage to irrigate tomatoes. Hopefully it works. For now, Kallio rises again as a ghost village, a monument to the progress we traded for a forgotten way of life. The orchards are gone, the school has no students, and the church remains buried by the mud. As the residents look down on their past, re-exposed by a changing climate, Kallio serves as a chilly warning of what we all stand to lose. Drought in Wales. When the earth gets thirsty, it starts to speak, and when a heat wave hits the UK, most people fret about curling tarmac, melting ice cream, and the National Railway turning into a slow-motion sauna. But for aerial archaeologist Toby Driver, it was Christmas in July when he uncovered several thousand Roman ruins. In the drought-stricken summer of 2018, Wales transformed into a giant archaeological etch-a-sketch. The lush green fields turned patchy, parched, and weirdly geometric. Circles, rectangles, and ghostly grids emerged in wheat and grass, just like in Poland. Remember the Polish roundels I told you about? They were exposed in a farmer's field because of drought. And this is the same situation, except Toby didn't find 2 things, he found thousands. Thousands of examples of Roman ingenuity hiding under the UK's drought-ravaged fields. It took just a little drought to unearth the ghost of an empire. Roman roads, forts, trenches, and villas were built by digging, compacting, or disturbing soil in ways that still affects drainage thousands of years later. Even if a structure is long gone, the memory of it lingers in how moisture moves through the earth. In drought conditions, this ancient disruption turns fields into 2D crime scene sketches. Some patches dry faster, and others stay suspiciously green. The result is like an X-ray taken by nature and highlighted in wilted chlorophyll. Toby explained it best, saying it's a bit like an X-ray of the field as revealed. And for once, Britain's miserable summer wasn't just good for grumbling, it was good for science. In 7 sweltering weeks, Driver and his team snapped over 5,700 aerial photographs of the Welsh countryside, revealing more than 200 previously unknown Roman-era sites just across Wales. Among the ruins were 2 rare marching camps, like the Roman equivalent of a pop-up tent city for legions on the move. Located near Caerwent in the Black Mountains, these temporary encampments were built by soldiers pushing into hostile Celtic territory between 50 and 80 AD. Think of them as military breadcrumbs left behind during Rome's decades-long campaign to subdue the Welsh tribes. You can actually trace the progress of Rome's invasion by looking at the imprints in fields during drought time. All of Toby's photographs revealed a Roman campaign step by step, complete with walls, ditches, and very grumpy soldiers wondering why they'd been posted to the rainy edge of the known world. And I don't know if you're thinking what I'm thinking, but won't these sites be riddled with bones? You'd think that if archaeologists started digging along the paths paths revealed by the drought, they'd find a whole heap of dead Romans. Until now, only 2 other marching camps had been confirmed in southeast Wales. The new discovery suggests more may be hiding under sheep pastures and golf courses. These camps are critical because they mark Roman movement through the region like pins on a conquest map. This is the meat of how the conquest happened, Driver said. It's not just about big forts, it's about all the in-between stuff. But there were forts. Lots and lots of forts. Forts, roads, and a forgotten infrastructure. Alongside the camps, the aerial surveys identified previously unknown forts. These would have been strategic installations for the Romans, part lookout post, part intimidation symbol, part Airbnb for a rotating cast of centurions. So what connected all of these camps and forts? An extensive, sophisticated Roman road network. The Romans were master road builders after all. There's a reason people are still saying all roads lead to Rome. One especially juicy find was a new Roman road running from Carmarthen to Kidwelly, bolstering a long-standing theory that Kidwelly once hosted a fort of its own. That's the kind of discovery that archaeologists love. It connects 2 dots while hinting at a third. Every mile of ancient road is a clue, because Roman infrastructure was like their empire, meaning it was overbuilt, durable, and slightly smug. These roads stitched together forts, villas, outposts, and economic centers across Roman-occupied Britain. So every time a dry summer peels one out of the ground like parchment, it offers a new thread to pull. Each fort exposed and investigated is another added chapter in Rome's history, and that's something we can all enjoy. One of the most intriguing finds came just outside the Penigare Hill Fort, a Celtic stronghold that the Romans eyed with more than just passing interest. At Penigare, the Drought revealed a remarkable cluster of stone buildings, previously hidden beneath centuries of sod and sheep. It's such an exciting discovery because this is where Celtic and Roman ways of life collided. It's where war turned into architecture and conquest into cohabitation. The discovery of the stone structures suggests the Romans may not have crushed the local society like bugs under their heels. The Romans weren't always brutal. They often absorbed and assimilated defeated cultures, building on top of what they conquered. And that seems to be what archaeologists found here. The Romans almost definitely took the Celtic stronghold by force, but they appear to have let the Celts stick around. May 2020 turned out to be the driest on record for Wales, potentially unlocking even more ghost ruins just below the surface. But Toby was stuck on the ground because of COVID. Now that everything is cleared up, Toby can't wait to get back in the air and start photographing the past again, one drought at a time. Why? Because he craves knowledge. And isn't that why you're here today? Toby said there are huge gaps in our understanding of Roman Wales, and we know the key to filling them is simple: dry weather. It's bittersweet, really. As the planet warms and the landscapes suffer, the ancient world becomes easier to find. Not because humans are getting smarter necessarily, but because the earth is thirsty and dry. It turns out the past is waiting beneath wheat fields, at the bottom of rivers, behind the hedgerows, and just below the drying crest of a hillside in Wales. If you pay attention, you might just see the outlines of an empire trying to speak one last time before the rain returns. Thanks for watching! Which one was your favorite prehistoric ruin? Which would you like to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!